Up next we have Mr. Noe Torres, and just to let everybody know that there are all 8 of his books up front for sale, and he's here for autographs after the show. So, Mr. Noe Torres, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you.
Okay, we appreciate everybody coming out tonight. UFOs is a topic that isn't spoken of a lot here in the Valley. And being a lifelong Valley resident myself, I have experienced the fact that hundreds of people have legitimate UFO sightings every year here in the Valley. And every time that I speak, I've had the good fortune to work on several projects and have been on the History Channel and on George Norrie a number of times. So people know that I have a fascination and a connection with UFOs. And every time I speak on the subject somewhere here in the Valley, I usually have a line of folks afterward that come and tell me their own personal UFO encounters. And these are the most amazing kind of encounters. The ones where it's extremely personal, and it has affected, in some cases, it has affected a family, an entire family, maybe even an entire generation of a family, and even generations beyond that still remember that someone in the past had an encounter. So it's something that a lot of us experience, and yet not too many people here in the Valley for some reason share their experiences, or at least not publicly. So it's something that's just kind of always below the surface. And it happens to be a topic that I have been interested in for many, many years, since I was a very small child. And so I'd like to share with you tonight the South Texas X-Files. These are cases that I have compiled over the last couple of years. And it'll start off with an introduction, kind of an introduction about how I became interested in the topic as a child. But then after that, I'm going to talk about some of the more interesting cases that have been brought to my attention that have a South Texas connection here. So excuse me 1 second while I pull this off. Okay. I'm going to start off by sharing with you this video that was presented recently on Laredo, by one of the Laredo television stations.
For those people who believe in other life forms in outer space, the Webb County Heritage Foundation hosted a UFO conference at TAMU, where people heard from authors and researchers. Our Lauren Kendrick has a story right now.
He says that UFOs date back to the beginning of mankind and adds that there were UFO sightings many years ago.
I mean, we found cave drawings. We have found other artifacts from thousands of years ago.
Other than being seen by primitive men, Torres says there is also proof of drawings and sketches from the Middle Ages. Torres says that if other species have been traveling to observe us for years,
then obviously they would have broken a lot of the secrets of physics and space travel that we are only now starting to theorize on paper.
Torres says that people get wrapped up in their everyday lives and are so used to seeing airplanes or jets in the sky that they don't notice the unidentified flying objects.
If you pay close attention on any given night in any area of the state or country, you're likely to see a phenomenon in the sky that can't be explained.
In fact, as recent as August, there were multiple reports of a UFO sighting in Laredo. If you look closely, you can see a light shoot across the sky. Torres also spoke about the UFO that actually landed near Laredo back in 1948.
It happened in July 1948, where a UFO had been pursued by military aircraft and had gone down.
After researching the incident and talking to other UFO researchers, Torres decided to write a book about it titled Fallen Angel, UFO Crash Near Laredo, Texas. When asked why people are so interested in UFOs and the possibility of aliens,
we realized deep down in our intellect that there's no way in the universe that we can be the only planet with intelligent life.
So the next time you see something in the sky, you might want to take a closer look. Lauren Kendrick, Pro 8 News.
And for those of you who want to learn more or even report a UFO sighting, you could log on to mufon.com.
Now, I need to say that the reason this was broadcast in Laredo is because I think it's fair to say that Laredo qualifies as one of the most intriguing UFO hotspots over the past couple of years. And that's one of the reasons that we are just thrilled to death that Mr. Ismael Cuellar and his team from the Laredo Paranormal Research Society are here tonight. They're going to show some amazing videos that they've taken in the Laredo area following my presentation. They're also going to demonstrate some of the amazing special equipment, night vision equipment, night vision cameras that they use for spotting these UFOs. You know, one of the things that's become very clear is that these objects, wherever they are, whatever their purpose might be, are now using technology that hides them, makes them invisible to human sight, to unaided sight. But with some of this special equipment, such as Ismael is going to demonstrate for us a little later tonight, this whole sky is going to open up to us, and you're going to see some amazing sights. Also, folks, there is a major UFO conference in November in Laredo. It's the Laredo UFO Conference, and the keynote speaker this year is Mr. Stanton Friedman. How many of you have seen Stanton Friedman on TV? Yeah, he is the world's best-known UFO researcher. I'm also going to be speaking there, and a whole bunch of other very interesting speakers. They're going to be talking about the 2012 prophecies. There's going to be a couple of speakers from Mexico as well. So it's going to be a fantastic conference. It's going to be held in Laredo at Texas A&M International University on November 10th. That's a Saturday. It's a one-day event. So please make sure to mark your calendars for that event. A lot of interesting stuff going on in Laredo, as we'll hear about in a few minutes. I'm going to talk about the first case that I'm going to talk about, the first South Texas X-File, is one that is personal to me. And I mentioned that I have always been interested in the topic since I was a small child, and that was because of an amazing story that my mom told me when I was little, and she told it to me several times. And every time she would tell me this, it would frighten me tremendously. It made me think, you know, I would always be thinking, well, what could this have been that she encountered? What could these beings be? So the first encounter, my family home, North Sherry Road, near Highway 107, in the middle 1940s, and my mom, Noe Torres, was the witness to this incident. Now, my family's home there on North Sherry Road back in the 1940s was an extremely remote area of the valley. The small frame home that you see in this picture, where my family at that time lived, it was surrounded by orange trees and grapefruit trees. So it was, and there was no sources of artificial illumination at night. It was basically pitch black there. They were also, my family was isolated from neighbors by quite a distance. So this is setting the scene for this. So one night what happened was my dad was out of town, and my older brothers, who were living at the home at the time, were asleep, and it was late at night, or I should say probably early in the morning of the following day, when my mother heard this tremendous commotion out behind the house. Now, at that time, my family had chickens and goats and other farm animals, you know, that were kept in pens behind the house. And she heard all of the animals in an extremely agitated state. You know, they were making noises, and they were just really excited about something. And she also saw strange lights and heard strange noises. So she decided to go out in the back and see what was affecting the animals. So she stepped out the back of this little frame home, and she went back to where my family kept the animals. the chickens and so forth. And she was on her way back there, and she had already entered the area where there are citrus trees, orange trees around her, when all of a sudden she felt this overwhelming presence. She described it as a presence. And above her, she heard noises, strange noises, whirring sounds. And she got the impression that there were lights shining around her. And try as hard as she could not lift her head up. And I remember to this day watching her telling me the story, and she was making with her neck like trying to imitate her attempts to look up above her and not being able to, like some force was keeping her from looking up. She fell down on her knees, and this activity continued above her. The family dog ran circles around her as she was there kneeling on the ground out in the midst of this citrus grove. The family dog was running around her, jumping wildly up in the air, snapping its jaws, and barking up above her, at something above her. And all this commotion and this ominous presence that she felt above her, and being a religious person, she assumed an attitude of prayer and was praying that whatever this evil presence, as she termed it, was, that it would go away. And she kind of lost the sense of time because she never told me how long this incident persisted. But when it suddenly ended as quickly as it had started, suddenly there was no more sound above her. All of the animals, the chickens and everything, the dog and everything grew still. And there was this tremendous quiet. She would always describe it to me as a tremendous shift from the commotion and confusion to suddenly absolute quiet and stillness, and the lights around her were gone. So when she didn't tell this story to me until my teenage years. Whenever she told it to me, it was like she was searching, even then, for some answer to what it was that she could have encountered. So this is what led me on this search over the years to find out more information about these mysterious visitors that have been with us all throughout time. As I said to the television people in Laredo, we have evidence of visitations of strange objects and strange creatures in human history dating back to prehistory. I mean, there have been a lot of cave drawings and rock paintings and other kinds of evidence of an archaeological nature that have been found. And you look at some of those depictions and they appear to be what we would call today flying saucers or UFOs. And a lot of those creatures that are depicted in those cave drawings and that rock art appear to be beings who are dressed in spacesuits. Now these were done thousands of years ago by people who had no knowledge of space travel and who could not go down to the local convenience store and pick up a copy of a science fiction book, okay? Science fiction did not exist, so. One of the more interesting topics, one of the most interesting early sightings here in the valley that I have collected over the years is the report of a mass UFO sighting in downtown McAllen in summer 1953. Now we have multiple witnesses for this. People actually came out of their homes and businesses in downtown McAllen, right around Main Street, and right about where the old McAllen Public Library was, until it recently moved. People came out of their homes, stopped their cars, got out of their cars, and everybody was standing there looking up in the sky at this wave of 6 or 7 silver discs flying around in circles for a long period of time. This is an artist's conception of what they saw, this wave of saucers, 6 or 7 of them. This story was first told to me by a gentleman from the valley named David Christian Newton, who runs a travel service down into Mexico, and he takes folks down to some property he owns in Mexico. And he also does some blogging and other online stuff. He does travel. He talks about travel into Mexico. And he told me, that he was one of the witnesses there in 1953. He was 6 years old, and it was himself and a number of other family members, including his brother and his brother's girlfriend, all of whom witnessed this daytime sighting of 6 or 7 flying discs moving back and forth very quickly over South Texas. And David Newton estimates that the discs, which were very brightly colored, they had a little tinge of orange, although they were mainly white. They were flying at perhaps an altitude of, let me go back here. They were flying at perhaps an altitude of 40,000 feet. And he's, when I talked to him, when he has been responding to my questions, he's struggling to remember if there was an actual formation. It seemed that most of the time they were not flying in formation, but then every now and then there could have been a pattern to the way that the discs were arranged in the sky, kind of a diagonal pattern. So here is the map of where this sighting occurred, where most of the witnesses were. Here is 10th Street in McAllen, here is 12th Street, and most of the people were standing right around here, around 12th and Cedar, 12th and Date Palm, right in that area. And, but Mr. Newton said that it wasn't just right here. That's where he and all the other people that he saw were standing, but actually people throughout McAllen that he talked to later, and even some people in Mission, had seen these discs flying around in the sky. This is the approximate pattern that they followed. The objects moved extremely fast, much faster than any jet aircraft. They circled the area, moving generally from east to southeast, and then west to northwest. So here is the circle that they followed. Okay, they would go down, David Newton says, they go down towards South Padre Island, they seem to dip down into Mexico, and come back from Mexico, and go on up past Edinburg. He says somewhere north of Moore Air Base, and then they would come and they would resume the thing again. And these maneuvers went on for 2 hours. They were covered by the local media. They were covered by the radio stations quite extensively. TV was kind of in its infancy back then, but at this time, 53. There was a lot of radio coverage. Okay, let me go back. So I got an email recently from a second witness in the case that Mr. Newton said that was also standing there looking at this, and this is Mary Lou Fouts, who responded and said, "Good morning. Yes, I do remember the UFO incident one sunny summer morning in 1953 vividly. I hope you and your family," and she goes on with a personal note there. The other case that really fascinates me that I want to talk about today is an encounter north of Edinburg in fall 1966. This is a fascinating case. And it involves a very credible witness who is a former deputy sheriff here in Hidalgo County, J.R. Nilo Ponce, who was later a county commissioner here in Hidalgo County. And the sighting occurred when Mr. Ponce worked for the sheriff's department. And I apologize that because of the light level here, some of these slides may not be very clear. But here is north of Edinburg. We've got Farm FM 490, and then here's 281 right here. 281 and FM 490. So we're talking about an area that's considerably north of town here, just to kind of set the stage. And what happened was that in October or November of 1966, Mr. Ponce, a deputy sheriff with the sheriff's department, received a phone call from the sheriff's department dispatcher, George Rapp. He said that there were a bunch of men standing out in the street in a very agitated state. They were wildly waving their arms and yelling at cars that were passing by, trying to get them to stop. And this was happening along Farm to Market 490 north of Edinburg near Laguna Seca Road. The man that was called into the sheriff's department by a person who had passed by the area as disturbed, crazy men that were creating a disturbance out there. So what it turned out to be was when Deputy Ponce got out there and responded to this call, he found that there were 8 men from North Texas whose identities unfortunately are not known, but they were construction workers that were working there at a ranch digging a caliche pit, and they had been hired to do that, and they worked for a company out of North Texas, and they were yelling and screaming alongside the road. And a motorist apparently went by, saw them, and then went to a nearby truck stop where he called it into the sheriff's department. So Joe Ponce, who is the late Deputy Ponce's son, said, when my father received a phone call from the sheriff's department, I heard him asking George Rapp, the dispatcher, if it was serious or if it was a prank call. Rapp told him that the men seen along Highway 490 appeared to be very frightened about something they had seen. And also, they said they needed help putting out a fire. My father got dressed, got in his vehicle, and responded to the call. So what happened was what had terrified these 8 men, these hardy construction workers, who weren't really scared very much, was they had encountered something really unknown, something very strange that came out of the sky. And, because of the nature of their construction project, they were actually living on site. They had a little trailer home there. So this was after they had knocked off for the day and they were in their trailer home. And when all of a sudden the area around there lit up with lots of lights and there were noises, and when they went out to look, a burst of fire came out of the sky, and everything around them was totally consumed by flames. Their heavy construction equipment, their pickup trucks, all of the electrical and mechanical equipment that they had was completely burned up. And they felt lucky to escape with their lives. They rushed out of there. And the workers also told deputies that they saw many bright lights and heard lots of humming. I'll go back there. They also, now this is another very interesting component to this case, there was this report of storm-like conditions on a perfectly still night when there was no reported storms anywhere in the area. There was gale-force winds, sudden strong winds on an otherwise calm night, and they saw flames shooting down out of the sky, setting ablaze all the surrounding area, including their vehicles and their mobile home. So this right here gives you kind of a sense of, once again, here's 490. 281 is back over this way. This was the caliche pit, which, by the way, still exists. It's fenced off. Joe Ponce has taken me out to the location, has walked through all the events of that night. And so right here is where the men had their trailer and where the incident happened. And then after everything around here was burned, they went out to 490 and were standing along the road asking passing motorists for help. And this is a close-up of the caliche pit, and this is right alongside it is where the men were staying that night. And this is what it looks like today. I went out there with Mr. Ponce. We found some interesting debris in the area. There were burned, charred marks on some of the rocks there. And there were also burned and charred pieces of tin and metal, all scattered throughout the area, even today.
Okay, what I can remember about that night was that my dad received a phone call from the sheriff's department at around 12 midnight. And the dispatcher, who at that time was George Rapp, was telling my dad to get out here to this area because there were some people that were standing out on Highway 490, and they were asking for help, or they were acting kind of particular. And my dad came out here, and that's when he found these gentlemen out here. But he didn't come by himself. He came with another gentleman by the name of Sam Gonzalez, who was the owner of the ranch. And they were the people that were standing out here and were asking for help. Were the workers that were working in the ranch in the caliche pits, getting caliche out. They worked for a company from upstate. They were all Anglo gentlemen. And when my father describes one of them in particular, was a gentleman who had just his T-shirt on and his pants, but he had urinated all over himself. That's how scared he was.
They must have seen something really unusual.
Yeah.
And they refused to go back to the work site.
Right. Yes. They in the report, if you ever find that police report, in the report it says that Mr. Gonzalez had asked them to go back, to where they were staying at in that trailer house or those living quarters, and they refused. They refused to go back. They said they weren't going to do it because apparently they didn't have just one occasion to see whatever they had seen, but they had seen it several times.
So Joe Ponce and some of the other residents that live in the area have told me that there have been recurring UFO and strange orbs of light seen in that same area where this incident occurred. For example, we have this from a local resident known as Manito, who lived near the caliche pit. He reported seeing a cigar-shaped object that hovered over the field that same night of this other incident. He had seen this and other bright lights hovering over the surrounding fields prior to the incident. The caliche pit workers themselves stated that they had seen strange lights hovering around the area on other occasions prior to the night of the fire. Spanish-speaking people who live near the area call these eerie night lights La Luz del Llano, which in English means the light of the fields. Locals say this area has been known for years as a site of strange phenomena. So, I just wanted to, here's a picture of Deputy Milo Ponce at the time, and the sheriff at that time was Sheriff E.E. Vickers. He had some men come from the Air Force to talk to him, and the Air Force personnel told them to not speak about what they had seen. So no more was ever said of the incident, and my father never spoke anymore about it, according to Joe Ponce. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is a case that is still under investigation. I'm not able to provide details tonight, complete details about it, because we're still looking into it. It seemed to be a credible case from a witness who is credible. And it happened this past spring, and it happened here in Edinburg, northwest of Edinburg near Moore Air Base. So this is the story that the witness has told us. We have an Edinburg resident named Natalie in her mid-40s, formerly employed at a non-profit agency, lives near the intersection of Freddie Gonzalez Drive and Jackson Road. So it was late at night, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when she was having trouble sleeping, and she got up and decided to go in her kitchen for a drink of water. As she was standing in her kitchen looking out the kitchen window, she saw bright lights out in the distance, off to the northwest from her vantage point. And she said it was an intensely bright light hovering a short distance above the horizon. She became very curious about this. This is her approximate location. Here's Freddie Gonzalez, here's Jackson Road, here's the intersection of the two, and she was looking off in this direction. So what the witness did, what Natalie did was she decided to go out into her backyard and see if she could get a closer look at what it was that was causing these lights. So she went out in her backyard, but the lights still looked relatively quite far away. So she got in her car and drove. She went up Jackson to Freddie, and Freddie over to McCall, McCall up to University, and then west on University. The whole time, the lights, seemed to be getting a little closer. The lights seemed to be getting a little closer, but it still seemed to be quite a distance away. And she was somewhat amazed by this, because when she first went out in her backyard and looked through her kitchen window, it looked like it was much closer. So where she ended up was she went all the way on University 107, University/107 to the west, all the way toward Mission, and then she turned on North Conway. And it was about halfway up between Conway and FM 1925, right in here, that she encountered a police barricade. So she stopped her car and she saw two highway patrolmen. She described them as highway patrolmen. Getting out of the car, she approached the officers. She continued looking at the strange object that was hovering above the ground. And it was hovering over the roadway, and she said that she could see, it was extremely bright. It was hovering quite a distance above the roadway, and it was affecting some of the trees and brush in the area that were swaying, and it was affecting an area below it. And so she walked out of her car, she pulled her car over on the side of the road, she walked up to the highway patrol officers, and they were also looking at the object. Their jaws dropped, at this amazing sight. And she said that all she could think of to ask them was, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" And she said that one of the officers turned to her and said, "Yes, ma'am." So then, it was clear that the men had been assigned to not let any motorists pass there, and so it was clear that she was not going to be able to get any closer to it. So she decided to get back in her vehicle and drive back home. And that's basically her story. But her testimony is very compelling, and as I say, it's still under investigation, and we're trying to find corroboration as well as further information about who the patrolman might have been. I've asked law enforcement agents if this might have been the type of behavior or the type of incident that the highway patrol would be sent out to guard, and they said yes, but the officers would not be told what it was that they were blocking the road for. They would not be given any details. They would just be told to block it there and not allow anyone past there. Another very interesting case happened near Zapata, Texas in the fall of 1994, and I got, this incident came firsthand from Domingo Reyes, who was a Spanish teacher at the time at Zapata High School, and he told me that he was working the football game on Friday night in Zapata at the high school. He was working the concession stand. He was one of the sponsors. And so the game ran kind of late, and then they had to stay and count the money at one of the buildings there afterward. And so he didn't get on the road until around midnight. He was living in a mobile home park just south of Zapata at the time. So he was headed there in his truck, in his 1990 Ram Charger, and he was headed east-southeast on Highway 83 toward his mobile home, which was about 17 miles away from the high school. He had driven about 12 miles. Here is Zapata, where Zapata High School at that time was, and he had driven southeast about 12 miles when he had his encounter. That's a pretty desolate area, by the way. Pretty desolate spot. This is a little bit closer view. And this is a Google Earth view of it. So there's not much there, just fields. So what Mr. Domingo Reyes saw was he saw an object that looked like a line of colored lights set inside of a larger object. Row of colored lights set inside of a larger object. On the underside, there was fire or sparks happening down around here. He saw a row of bright colored lights across the width of the object. They were multicolored. He saw orange, blue, white. They were also blinking on and off. The UFO, and he's just guesstimating, of course, he was looking at it at first through his rearview mirror, and then he saw it overhead from his front windshield, but he was estimating that it might have been about 18 feet in diameter. So the object came right over his pickup truck, right over his pickup truck. He pulled over, turned his truck off as he saw the object approach. He was extremely scared. He noticed there were 2 or 3 vehicles driving past him at a very high rate of speed, and he was the only one that had pulled over and stopped. The UFO hovered directly over the hood of his truck for approximately 30 seconds, and then shot straight up in the air and was gone in a second. We have another very interesting case that comes to us from Harlingen, and this one came up in my research of events that are listed as unexplained in the official U.S. Air Force Blue Book files. This is case number 10826 from Project Blue Book, and it occurred in Harlingen, Texas on August 6, 1966. Back when I was working on Mexico's Roswell, which was the first book that I published on this subject, before I published the book Mexico's Roswell, I was working on a book about Valley UFO cases specifically, and this was one of the cases that I was looking at to include in my book because I found it so interesting. So this happened near what is today Coakley Middle School, and there were 4 witnesses who testified to the Blue Book investigators. And it occurred at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. There was a dome-shaped, like an upside-down cup. And observed was an entity that was 3 to 4 feet tall, dressed in black overalls with a gold shimmer. And this right here is a little excerpt from the official index to the Project Blue Book files. So what happened was that this family in Harlingen saw this dark object, which they described as looking like an upside-down cup, and it was hovering over their house. There were 3 children, ages 6 through 9, who said they saw a square of yellow light open like a doorway, and an entity that they described as a dwarf, a little guy standing about 3 or 4 feet tall, dressed in black coveralls, that had kind of a gold shimmer to it. And moments later, the door opened, and actually the door closed, and the object moved slowly away from the house, emitting a soft humming sound. And this is a well-documented case that's included in many case histories about UFOs, and in the Project Blue Book UFO Unknowns book as well. So this is the location. August 6, 1966. This is the approximate location near Center Houston Park in Harlingen, and of this well-known Valley UFO case. Now, another interesting angle to this is that Project Blue Book registered another case from the same witnesses less than a month later, September 3rd, 1966, at the same location. The children were watching television when the signal became blurred, and they saw above their home a fantastic spinning light hovering in the sky and illuminating the house with an intense beam of light. So the Project Blue Book investigators thought this was kind of unusual, that you had a reoccurrence of a major UFO sighting within a short period of time after the first one. Another UFO encounter that's been well documented that happened here in the Valley occurred in Brownsville in April 1986 at approximately 11:50 p.m. There were two witnesses driving back home after they dropped off a friend when they spotted a very unusual object in the sky moving toward their vehicle. They stopped at an intersection to watch and noticed another man in a station wagon also stopping to watch. And so what they ended up seeing was a saucer-shaped craft that hovered over their vehicle at about the height of a two-story building. This is the approximate location of this encounter. Here's Paredes Line Road. Here's East Price Road. Here's Hannah High School in Brownsville. So right about in this area is where this unusual UFO encounter occurred. So another striking part about this was that when they were observing the UFO, there seemed to be a part where they could see these strange lights that seemed to be glass windows, and they could make out these vague shapes through the windows moving around. So that adds another unusual element to this as well. The figures appeared to be human, except that they had very long and thin arms, which is another frequent description of these UFO entities. So the object eventually went away, but another interesting observation they made was that there were military helicopters, 3 military helicopters, headed in the general direction where the UFO had taken off to. So often there are military aircraft, helicopters, or jets seen chasing some of these strange objects. More recently, in 2010, we had a sighting in downtown McAllen, another downtown daytime sighting in McAllen that has some similarities to the mass sighting that I spoke about in 1953, except this happened just a couple of years ago. And where it happened was near the intersection of Pecan Boulevard and Bicentennial. Here's Pecan, here's Bicentennial, and this is Main Street. So here on Main Street, near Maple and Main, actually that area has seen a number of reported UFO sightings over the past 2 or 3 years. So actually I've been out there to observe the skies as well, because this seems to be an area, for whatever reason, that has had a high level of sightings. So what happened there was that Threshers took this picture of a strange glowing object in the daytime sky, and they took it with a little cell phone camera, which I'm going to show you the film here in a second. Here's the object, and Israel Thrasher, a young man who graduated from McAllen High School last year, was taking this, and he was trying to keep this tree kind of as a reference point. He was trying to keep it in his view. And I don't have time to show the whole film, but what happens here is eventually it goes down into the leaves of the tree, and then it does a U-turn and comes back out. So some people look at this and say, well, it's obviously something being blown in the wind. But something that's being blown in the wind would not then turn around and reverse its direction. So this was a very unusual sighting, and it's kind of typical of a lot of the sightings that are reported here in the valley. And so that's just a snippet of the Thrasher film. Okay, and the last topic I'm going to talk about to kind of set the stage for Ismael Cuellar and the Laredo Paranormal Research Society, who are going to speak here in just a few minutes. I'm going to talk about a very well-known case in ufology called the Laredo UFO crash. And this happened on July 7th, 1948. I have written a book about it called Fallen Angel, and it's a very interesting case. Although it still lacks a lot of first-hand evidence and first-hand witnesses, nonetheless, it remains a very interesting case. Now, if you go to Wikipedia and look up Laredo, Texas UFO crash, this is the article that I wrote some years ago about the incident for Wikipedia. And that was at the time that there was so much interest. I was getting so many emails and people were contacting me about this case that I decided to go ahead and write my book about it. And I found snippets of this story in an article in Texas Monthly by Tom McCullough called Close Encounters of the Lone Star Kind. I thought that was a real cute title. And it talked about like the 10 major UFO cases in Texas that have occurred throughout history. This was one of them. The case is also mentioned extensively in the book UFO Crash at Aztec by William S. Steinman and Wendell Stevens, published in 1986. It's also mentioned in several other books, including Jerome Clark's famous UFO Encyclopedia of the Extraterrestrial. So this is a case that UFO investigators have known for a while about. So what happened was on July 7, 1948 at 1:22 p.m., this object was spotted streaking in at about 2,000 miles, spotted over Washington State and moving rapidly toward Arizona. It was reportedly chased by at least 2 U.S. military jets. Did the jets fire upon it? We can't be absolutely certain, but it stands to reason because of the policies that our government had at that time. It seems very likely that they did. Along its route, at least 2 military aircraft pursued the fast-moving object, which they reportedly described as a metallic streak. So there was a lot of chatter on the military radio bands about this. And some accounts claim that the jets fired on the object and may have been responsible for downing it. These are just some representative articles from that time period where there were orders given to Air Force pilots to shoot down flying saucers. So, I mean, this was a policy that was in place for a very short period of time. And then when we started losing lots of aircraft, then this policy was rescinded, and there was no further reports of our military pilots being shot down or being killed while pursuing UFOs. So at approximately 2:29 p.m., the flying disc slowed down to an estimated 2,000 miles and down to about 90 miles per hour, and began this wobbly descent. And it ended up crashing about 40 miles south of Laredo, near the Rio Grande River, but on the Mexican side of the international boundary. And this is the approximate point where this occurred. And some people have said it was actually, they've observed that it was actually kind of close to Zapata on the U.S. side. Down in this area, here's Laredo, and on down here in this general area. This is a 1948 Texas road map. So anyway, another interesting part about this, and I want to wrap it up, is there was a body discovered. It was described as a humanoid-appearing being, but much smaller, large head. The body was said to be about 4 feet 6 inches long, with a head extremely large compared to the rest of the torso. The eyes were gone, and there were no visible ears, nose, or lips, with just a slit where teeth and a tongue should be. The arms appeared much longer than a human, and the hands had 4 claw-like appendages. There's a lot more to say about these cases, but unfortunately we don't have the time tonight. I want to invite all of you to consider attending the Laredo UFO Conference on Saturday, November 10th at Texas A&M International University in Laredo. And I appreciate everyone's interest tonight. In order to maximize the time to this next excellent presentation from the Laredo Paranormal Group, I'm not going to take any questions right now, but afterward I'll join Ismael and his guys, and we'll take some questions at the end of the next lecture. Thank you very much for your kind attention.